staff work for a lot of Garde. He just came over to my house and changed in a day, changed the entire look of my pondscape. So he's a business member, which we appreciate. And he's also an avid bow hunter, so don't make him mad. And he's going to talk to us today about winterizing your pond, some tips like how to detect a leak, and there will be a Q&A session.
Okay. All right, so let's see. Can anyone, I guess, hear me? You know what? I'm going to do it without, I think. I'll talk loud. Okay. A little bit of, right. A little bit about me. So I went to school, eons ago, and actually I have a degree in programming, and that was supposed to be what I was supposed to be. And then it all started, it was about, I'd say, 25 years ago for my mother. And she had a patio put on the back of her house, and there was a tree. And when they didn't know when they put the patio down that it killed the tree, so now she has a dirt patch. So she thought, I know, I'm going to put a fountain in this thing. Well, I could just think about my Mexican mother going, oh God, it's going to be probably hot pink and concrete and awful. So I thought, wait a second, Mom, there's something called a water feature. I think it's a little bit more organic, a little bit more natural, and I'm all about nature and stuff. So of course, me, after studying and learn. Short story, shorter, I designed my first water feature, and it was just a 50-gallon drum, basically a barrel, a whiskey barrel, that I dumped into a small pond. And then I designed your 500 in the front yard, and the neighbors saw it, and I designed my first 2,000 pretty shortly after that. And then it just escalated from there. And then I became the president for about a year of the Water Garden Club back in the day. And I won #1 on pond tour with the Tackett's Pond. And then I did a micropsy wet lab, I've written some articles, and then it just went from there. And then before I knew it, I was designing bigger and better and more advanced, and now it's all I do and all I love. So today, we're going to be talking about some pretty easy stuff when it comes to winter care. I mean, everyone's gone through their winters with their ponds. And unlike the northerners that have all the ice and snow, we don't have that. You know, we have a spit of just a little bit cold here and there. We don't have to worry about the super freezing issues or crazy stuff. But there's a couple basic stuff that I know most of everyone's been through. But for the most part, when it comes to the care on these ponds, is really kind of shutting it down a bit, mostly for the plants more than for the fish. You know, as we know, our fish go through, I call it brumation. You might have heard a term called topar. It's unlike hibernation like in a mammal. When a bear goes to sleep for the winter, it completely shuts down. The mental facilities, circulation, respiration, everything kind of goes on suspension mode. But a fish, being a prey item, they can't afford to do that. They'd be easy pickings in that water. So their brain stays quite a bit active, but the body starts to slow down. That's why I'm sure we've heard, like in the wintertime, stop feeding your fish or stop feeding high protein. Is because what can happen is, you know, these koi don't even have a stomach. They have one long gut. And what will happen is they'll actually rot from the inside out, should it get all kind of clogged up on some of our, you know, influx. And that's one of the problems about our winters. We get hot and then we're cold, and then we're hot and then we're cold. And one minute they're all popsicles at the bottom, and the next minute they're begging for food. You know, and my mother's the worst of them all, you know, in her big pond with 20-some, you know, fish babies that she has to name every single one, and they always get a head count. And the biggest thing when feeding them, she goes, well, Carl, they're starving. I said, Mother, they're fine, just leave them alone. And so, of course, I know she's sneaking food behind my back. I go over there and I see she's getting into the koi food. And I said, Mom, here's what you can do. I said, either you get into more of a wheat germ-based kind of food form, not so high protein for their stomachs, or get just the cheapest Cheerios you can find at the store. Cheerios are nothing but a carbohydrate. It's nothing. It's not going to plug them up. So if you know, crush up those Cheerios. Now, don't get the apple flavored stuff and all that jizz. I don't want no chocolate Cheerios in there. Just normal Cheerios. Give them to the fish, and they're fine. And that's mostly when they're kind of semi-active in that 60 to 65. Once we get to 50s, I tell my mother, I tell my father, steal the food away from Mom and hide it where she can't find it, because she's going to do it anyway. So 50 and below, just stop feeding. They're going to be fine. These are what these fish do. These are what they're used to. They'll be good. So anyways, so really, when it comes to the ponds, the biggest thing really is the plants, because we all know we'll get these minor little freezes, and especially the marginals. The next thing we see, all our water iris are just caned over. Our umbrella palm is right in the pond, all that jazz. So to kind of precipitate that, I just say before we get those minor or semi or even hard little freezes that come through, just cut your plants down. Don't cut them underwater when it comes to marginals. You don't want to flood that plant, but just cut those stalks about 3 or 4 inches above the surface of the water, and they'll be fine. That'll just save you from a cold day when you're out there trying to mess with that pond because everything's now toppled into your water and just mucking everything up. So that's one thing, of course, you can do when it comes to that. Obviously, we all know our oak trees and how dirty those things can be. So netting the pond sometimes. Our skimmers can only do so much. So, of course, we get the deluge of the acorns and the leaf drop and the pollen tassels coming off these trees. So some of us, under the deepest canopies, it's the best bet just to throw a net on that pond. Now, people think, okay, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to get a bird netting, and I'll net the pond just like Carlos said, and everything's going to be great. No. That might work because most bird netting is either 1/2 inch or 1 by 1 inch netting. So our oak leaves will go right through it. The acorns will go right through it. You need to find a net that is smaller than the breeze you're trying to stop. At my mother's pond, she has a Chinese tallow, and those leaves are as big as a maple leaf. So she can't afford to use 1 inch netting. But for the rest of us, that's not going to work. So what I did was, and you can grab this paper on the way out for those that didn't see this, I made a list here of things I'm going to talk about, and specifically the net I'm about to talk about. And this net I've used for years. And you can see when you pick this up, it says netting for your pond, it says the website and what to search for. This one right here is UV stabilized, and this netting is 1/4 by 1/4. So this will stop everything. I've seen it. And the big thing too is don't put your net just flat across your pond. As all that stuff comes down, it's going to bow it down into the water, and then you got to lift it up and have help and all that. Attempt to do whatever you can to make it self-cleaning. And so that means almost like making it like a tent. People say, well, how do I do that, Carlos? I don't really have anything to, trees or anything around. What you can do is take PVC, an old coffee can or some kind of container, mix some easy to mix mortar from Home Depot as your anchor, put that PVC pipe in and let it solidify. Then what you do is you can move that in your pond and then put a coupler slip to another piece of PVC and a T on top. Now you have that tent pulling effect. Now you can make it go like a triangle off the edges of your pond. So that's one way to try and attempt to get that net to stay more of a vertical, almost tent effect. A little easier than trying to lay it flat. Sheila.
So the cement isn't going to affect the water?
Correct. So what's in cement or mortar is what's called lime. And people are, oh my gosh, it's going to leach out that lime. And that can happen. When you mix it fresh and you pour it thick and don't allow that to cure out, okay? What can happen is all the agitation of those waterfalls, you start seeing bubbles in your pond. You're thinking, oh my God, it's going to poison everything. It's not good, that's for sure. So when you mix this stuff, allow this to set up for about a week. Give it all the time in the world. We're not in a rush, right? This is something we're thinking about ahead of time. So no, it will not. A lot of my designs are actually 95% all mortared. All have mortar. In the strings, in the coping, in the skimmer substrate. I mean, everything is locked in place. And I always give that stuff days before I even put water on it. And I've been doing it for 20 years and never had an issue with the lime leach out and hurting fish. So yeah, just give that, whatever you poured into, just give it a good week to cure out and you'll be fine. What else can we talk about? So some of us have tropical lilies. Those, as we all know, are a lot kind of harder to take care in the winter time than the hardies just because they seem to phase out. We spend all this money on them. And the next thing we know, even though they're deep in our ponds at 4 feet or 5 feet, they tinker out too. So sometimes the tropicals need a little bit more care. I'll tend to pull them. Of course, I have a greenhouse. Not a whole lot of people do. Some people have some luck putting them near windows or inside. It's kind of a gamble with those. But that's why I just mess with hard lilies for the most part. It's always good to kind of get your biotank, get everything kind of cleaned out in order. If you have excess junk at the bottom of your pond, remember, even though it's wintertime and it's not hot and everything's going like in the summertime, you still have decomposition and you still have organic breakdown even when the water's cold. So to take that out, to kind of preset, the stage as far as not having a dirty pond is always the best way to do it. So by scooping out excess leaves off that bottom, just trying to make sure you don't have too much of a muck layer, down there, what's called a benthic layer down at the very bottom where all that, muck and leaves and all the rest of that stuff, it's always a good idea. Try and, get some of that out as best you can. Biofilters, time to clean them, Now, once the water gets super cold, you'll see how clear your water gets. And people think, wait a second, how does my water get so clear? Well, one of the biggest things is those fish, as we all know, turn into little fish popsicles and really don't move. So they're not stirring up as much stuff as they do in the summertime. So it's kind of nice to see the water so clear, but that's what's really happening. Everything drops out of suspension, and you have, of course, different strata of water, and they're not moving so much. So to get that out in the beginning is always kind of the best thing to do. Now, when we have the snowmageddon of years past and all my pond clients, it was really cool. Only one person ever got a hold of me. He's like, Carlos, my pipes broke on my waterfall. He's like, should I have been running them? And my answer to that is, yeah, keep everything running. Keep it going. We're not the Northerners. We don't have the super ice overs and we need the icers and all this other stuff. It's always best to keep, our waterfalls going. And we've had these little cold snaps where, we get to freezing or, this or that. You've got to remember, unless you have a way to drain those pipes, if you do stop your stuff, you then have the chance of breaking pipes. If you're moving water through, you'll see that your waterfall starts to ice over. And then they say, well, Carlos, what's going to happen then? I've seen it get really, really crazy. The only bad part with waterfalls icing over is just be aware of how much is going on. Because as the water builds up on itself and ices and ices and ices, it starts to blanch out and go over the edges of the liner. Now you're losing water. So just keep kind of tabs on how much icing is going on. And if you need to, take a little stick or whatever, break it down a little bit, but you can keep running it. But watch how that ice builds up. Is it going over flanges of biofalls and too much to the lateral sides and over streams and things like that? If it's not, let it run. Let it run for the most part. And then there you see about the reducing the feeding on those temperatures right there. That's just what I prefer. But back to the exposed plumbing.
And that's water temperature.
That's water temperature. Yeah, that's not air temperature. That's water temperature. So I tell, like my mother, I said, Mom, I said, go to H-E-B and get you one of those little cheap spa thermometers for the pool. And I said, tie it to something so it doesn't float into the skimmer, get sucked in, and that way you can monitor what the water temperature is, not how cold it is to the air temperature. It's what they're feeling, not what we're doing, okay? And then back to the exposed plumbing. So like I said, the only reason why that one client's pipes broke when that snowmageddon was because they're cycling on and off that electricity like happened to some of us. And so he didn't have a choice but to lose power for a couple days. And so he was one of the rare clients I have that actually have piping above to one of his big bead filters, and that water got stuck in a 90 and then into a Y and then cracked. So if you do kind of think about that, because we kind of know, well, sometimes we might not have a choice that we might have electricity or not. And if we don't and we have exposed plumbing, well, just like anything else outside, like our spigots, just cover it up. And you most likely will be able to get away with that. So really, that's really kind of it. It's not rocket scientists, as we all know, when it comes to our ponds in the wintertime. Now, for example, Sheila, when it comes to your pond, what do you do for your winter? Do you do anything special to your pond when it comes to winter? Do you add beneficial bacteria for the winter? Do you change anything? Just let it run, huh? Okay, gotcha. Henry?
No.
Nothing much, huh? No? For the most part, yeah, it's nothing too specific. It's like I said, the biggest thing to me is really just cutting those plants down. Because no one wants to be out there when it is freezing going, oh, I got to go outside and get that water and get all those plants. That's about the biggest thing there is. So that was easy. Now, here's what I really want to talk about. And here's one of my biggest calls I always get. Carlos, my pond is leaking. What could it be? I have no idea where to start. And the first thing I always tell my clients is we got to break this thing down into two separate parts. We have the pond and we have the waterfall or the stream. Almost everyone I know has some kind of aeration, right? We need to cause turbidity in this pond, infuse oxygen, DOC, dissolved oxygen content into the water. And most everyone has a waterfall or a stream. And in my over 20 years of doing this, it almost seems like it's always in the stream. But sometimes, of course, it can be down in the pond. So I tell them the first thing you want to do is just shut off your pumps, right? Just let's start from the beginning. Let's start from square one. Pull the plug, turn off your power. So now what happens is now the waterfall isn't running, the waterfalls aren't running, now the pond is just still. Now, in the summertime, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, when we're dealing with fish, remember, warm water holds less DOC. So sometimes we have to do aeration and other stuff to make sure those fish are okay in the meantime when we're doing this test. In the wintertime, don't worry about it. They're fine. And you can know your fish are struggling because you'll see what's called gasping, where they'll come up to the surface and they literally look like you can hear them almost breathing, all right? Now you know there's not enough oxygen. But let's back up a little bit. Let's just get back to square one. Turn off the power. Now just the pond is at the level you want. So now the next step we're going to do is watch that pond level. If you have the pump off and that water in that pond doesn't go anywhere, well, interesting, that's funny, because the minute I plug in this pump, wow, I just lost 4 inches overnight, okay? Now let's say you have the power off, the pond's at the level you want, but now the pond's going down without the pump running. Oh, wait a second, it's the pond. It's the pond, it's losing it from here. Now remember this, water always seeks its own level. Well, what does that really mean? Take a bowl of water, take a drill and pop a hole in the side of that thing 50% down. That water with hydrostatic pressure is going to push on that hole. It's all going to seep out and stop right at that 50% level. Same thing with the pond. If that deer jumped in and that hoof cut through that 45 mil a foot down, it's going to go down to that part and stop. You know, if maybe the pre-liner wasn't right, and finally after all these years, that big 80-pound moss rock boulder ground against the other one and made a hole a foot, 2 feet down, that's where it's going to stop. So what you're going to want to do is always make a mark, okay? Don't think you're going to, I'll remember. No. I want you to get out there and make a mark. So let's say the first day I went down 2 inches. Or people say, Carlos, I went down really fast in the first couple days and then started slowing down before it stopped. Well, I use that term hydrostatic pressure. You put a ton of water weight pressure down here and it's going to squirt out like crazy. But once it starts getting closer, there's less hydrostatic pressure. Your leak's going to slow down and then eventually stop. So I want it to stop. Don't keep calling me saying, well, it's still going down or it went down another ½ inch. I want it to stop, because it will stop. Because that tells me and that tells my client, wait a second, I don't have to rip apart this entire pond to find this, who knows what it is. All I know is it stops when it's a foot down. Now I know to concentrate my efforts at a foot down from the perimeter of that pond. Or who knows, maybe something crazy happened. Maybe something came through the bottom of it, right? And it's going to go all the way down. Now, of course, I tell my clients, well, if you have fish and you're concerned about now it getting half empty and predators taking your fish, well, then you call me over, I bring big holding tanks, and we pull your fish out and continue the experiment. But that's where we're going to start. And one of the biggest things I see when it comes to a leak in a pond is the skimmer or a bottom drain. Why is that? Because that is a compromise in integrity of the liner. We have cut a hole in the liner with 12 bolts on a flange compression seal, and oh man, that thing's 15 years old. And I'll go over there and literally pull roots out of the side where it's gone through the sealant, gone through the bolts, and start separating that flange right off the body of the housing. So you look at the most obvious things and you're thinking, okay, well then how do I do that? Where exactly do I look for that? Now in this picture, you see this guy installing a basic skimmer, and you see that's the compression flange I talked about and all the bolts he's doing. And where you're going to leak is basically right between the liner and the body back in here, on either side, wherever that might be coming around here. And people say, well, Carlos, why do I want to see this big puddle next to my pond? Because you're percolating water down this way. Of course, it's always going to find its lowest level down the excavation of the pond and get underneath. And when I drain these ponds, when there's not rock pressure or weight, you should see the hydrostatic pressure in reverse push the liner up. And I've seen massive leaks where we have extreme failures and the whole liner blows up. That's what's happening. So really your leak's going to be here. So when it comes to figuring out, am I leaking from my skimmer, you're going to need to dig the soil down on the sides here. Remove probably the coping stone away. Start to dig down through the soil and then start to look behind here, all right? A lot of times what I'll see when it's been a leak for a long time is we have so much mineral in our water. You'll see the calcite evidence of it dripping down the back of a liner. Liner should be as pitch black as what this looks like. When you start to see that gray kind of, scuzz on it, like we all see in our shower heads and everything, that's that lime calcite I speak of. And that can tell you, oh man, that's been dripping back here for a long time. So you're going to want to go all the way down. Now the skimmers are specific to, of course, the water as far as how you put them, how you set them. So you're looking from about this third bolt all the way down and even across the bottom. Just because it's dry here, look at the other side, dig your hole here. Dig all the way down to where you can look underneath this right here. Okay, this one takes 6 normally across this part right here. That's where you could be leaking from, and just you'll never see it. I deal with a lot of ponds that, of course, are not mortared like I do mine. Look at those edging stones. Sometimes those edging stones can shift down. If we have a lot of rains, they can sag and pull liners down off edgings. And especially when you have a skimmer, when you lose and lose and lose water, not enough water is getting in, and then, of course, you can actually thermo lock up your pump, because these pumps are most of them thermocooled. So when there's too much air getting in, it's not sucking in the water. Now, if they're exposed to water, they're gurgling, and gurgling is because the water's obviously getting out of the system. So that is one of the biggest places I find leaks in this skimmer flange right here. And they're not that hard to repair. It's a matter of really getting new hardware normally, pulling this off, new sealant, and then basically putting it back on. That's one way to do that. Next, let's see. So here's, again, you see putting the sealant here, and this is where it's going to compromise right here. It's along this inner side. This thing goes right through the front of the body up here, and this is where you'll have separation with roots, or maybe a bolt just came off, or for some reason it's coming away. This is where it's going to be leaking, right in that kind of section between the flange, the liner, and the body, and just going straight down to the ground. You'll never know it. So if you have a skimmer, always check those out. Another thing, bulkheads, right? Bulkheads are these black things that obviously there's one in the skimmer that takes the water from your pump if you have a skimmer down your plumbing to your waterfall. In this case, if you have an old-fashioned, let's say, biofilter, they come in from the bottom and they upflow through the filter material and then gravity flow over the weir, over the lip right here. These guys, I normally don't see them go bad, but they can, because remember, wherever you have a supposed water seal, could be a water escape, and that's what we're talking about. If you have one of these guys at the top of your waterfall, this is always filled with water. So if this guy is somehow compromised, well then yeah, you'll be leaking down here. And I was like, well, how do I get to it? Well, once again, we have to do some digging. It's not always easy. Sometimes you have to dig down to the bottom. Now, the other day, for somebody, I went ahead and looked at their biotank and had figured out why they were leaking there. And what had happened was there also is a flange joint here. The liner goes behind this front and crushes to the body of the biotank. And the bolts here can also separate, just like in the skimmer, you know. So, or you can put too much pressure of rock work on this guy and literally peel that guy right away and break it, like someone I know. So, you know, be cautious of these points. Wherever there's a connection pressure point, wherever there's a screw-in point, even some of the joints we use in the plumbing, don't put a 180-pound boulder on that PVC pipe, it's just a foot underground. We need to, figure out how to, either disperse the weight, or when I do boulders the size of this table on some of these ponds and I need to run my pipework beneath it, I'll use two other rocks, almost like a tabletop, like the legs on a table. One here, and that big 300, 500-pound boulder on top. So there's no crush pressure coming down on even Schedule 40 PVC. You never do it on Flex PVC, but even I'm just, that one little bit more of just, little extra get-go can sometimes save you some big problems. So there's another potential leak point that it could be along the flange here. And one of the biggest ones I see, I fixed 11 ponds this season, was people losing water because the mice and the rats had gotten behind here, and especially these waterfalls, because if you think about it, you have the food, or your neighbors do, the bird feeders. Now you have the water, and now you just set up free housing for them with all those boulder work. So they're going to get behind everything, and of course their little teeth never stop growing. So not that they want to eat the 45 mil liner, they just want to chew on it to wear it down, and next thing you know, they punched a hole back here. And you see how this lip of this weir extends about 5 to 6 inches depending on what you have. It creates a perfect pocket right back here for them to go through the rock work and set up housing right here. And this is almost every time where I find rat shoes, is right underneath this lip area right here. So just be, prepared for that too.
It's cool and wet under there, and I like both of those things.
Both those things work too. Yep. And I mean, you definitely have stuff going on there, because I'll pull out bird feathers, nesting material. I can see the acorns chewed on, and people think, well, oh, it's a red squirrel. No. Red squirrels don't burrow like that. Now you have your black ground squirrel that can do some stuff, but no. Almost every time it's going to be your typical, tree rat, the brown guys about this big, or your small field mice that do it. Either one. So there's just another look at that skimmer. The biotank. You can see the bulkhead down here, and you see the flange in here. So like I said, this is rare. I rarely ever see these bulkheads, but what I see the most of when it comes to the very top of waterfalls is right here, this compression seal. Either it somehow came away, broke away, whatever happened, or it's the rodents doing something up in there. So be aware of that. Now, let's say you're thinking, okay, Carl, so where I've looked, it's not my pond. The biotank's good. There's no rats there. But the minute that water goes down that stream, I think that's where I'm losing it from. Okay. Well, now let's check how the edging's done. So you see how this liner here is wrapped behind this big boulder, okay? There's obviously a rock shelf they're setting this big boulder on, and now I know what they're gonna do. He's working on this, and then they'll ultimately, to not see 45 mil liner on the edges of your pond, they're gonna fill this guy up halfway, so you have this nice natural edge right here, and he's wrapped behind it. Check that along the streams. Check that on your pond. If this guy over time has sagged backwards for any reason, pull this liner down. Your plants out here in this planting bed have grown over the liner. grabbed that liner and pulled it down because they're seeking that water. Well, there you go. There's where your water's going, you know. And so it's not necessarily compromised to the hole to the liner. No, it's just the roots came across and pulled it down. I see that happen all the time. We all love our plants, but unfortunately they can misbehave, especially these guys on the outside coming in. And you'll see on this next one here, okay, see the red is a liner, okay, and you see the water level should be beneath that liner. Well, in time, stuff can sag. And that's why I do everything in mortar, because I want to have integrity to keep this liner up and behind the rock work, you know, so nothing sags down. And that's what will happen on the edges of your stream or your pond. Just in time, you have structural shift and sag, and you can pull stuff down for those ones that are, you know, are natural like that. Now, things to have for leak emergencies. What blows my mind, y'all that have some great koi and don't have these, is either an air pump or just a spare pump. Okay. Let me tell you the benefits of either or. So let's go back to what I was saying earlier. Let's say you have to look for this leak in this pond and it's summertime. It's 103 degrees outside. You can't afford to lose that air. Those fish are going to have a problem with it. So what you want to do is either have an air pump. And an air pump, as you see, most everyone knows, is just basically the unit, tubing, and some kind of air diffuser, right? I don't get these guys. Yeah, go to Amazon and get them cheap, whatever. Ugh. The problem with these guys is many things. Mostly they don't have the power you need for most ponds, right? It's almost like better for aquariums. Their output of air bubbles is crap. I don't like using these smaller guys. I always like using bigger pond-specific units that almost all look at the size and difference. This one's flat and small, this one's like big and hefty, okay? Their lines here are weighted. If you don't use weighted lines, you're going to see all this hosing floating all over the top of your pond. Might as well just sink it down so you don't have to worry about it. And of course, you're going to have air discs or pucks or anything else. Here's my favorite right here. And like I said, on this paper on the way out, this right here, this type of Anjon air pump is all right here. All these links are right here, so you can find exactly this. Here's what I like about this. Heavy duty unit has like these two little air diffusers, and of course this whole plate right here is weighted, so that's going to go all the way down the bottom of your pond. And then of course this line is heavy duty, you know, a lot thicker and heavy duty, and floats it all the way down, or sinks it to the bottom of the pond. This is where you want to go. You want to definitely have a good unit when it comes just to an air pump. Now let's say, well, Carlos, I'd rather not just put air in there. I want to kind of rotate the water a little bit while I'm doing this. I want to infuse air, but I want to rotate water. Okay, well, get yourself a submersible. Don't go to Home Depot or Lowe's and go to the little water garden section. Get one of those 1,000-gallon little small pumps that have a guard on it this big, because what's going to happen? The minute you drop down your pond, it's going to get all the debris stuck right to it, and then up, slow down again. Up, I got to fix it. You know, because what you're going to do is you're going to drop this little pump down in your water. You're going to get the correct hosing, come back out of the water, aim like a fire hose, so it's shooting that water back into the pond, and it's aerating and causing all that great, you know, rotation and everything else for your fish. I'd rather get, and you see here, this is what people have to do sometimes. When their guard is so small, they try and wrap it in a pump sock or trying to, you know, do something, you know, concoction like this. If you're going to go, I like these bigger guards that come like this. And once again, this is on here. I like these with a big, fat, big guard. It's a guard on top, guard on bottom. It's a clamshell effect that just opens like this up and around your pump. And these guys are the way to go. And here's a better picture of it right there. You can see. Here, you can move this adjustable knuckle in any direction. You attach your hosing. I always put the biggest hosing you can on these guys. Now you see what we're looking at here is called a reducer fitting here. See how it goes from 1/2, 1 1/4 to 1 inch. If you're going to use the biggest one here, cut these two smaller guys off. All right, you want as much flow as you can. You would not go ahead and put on a 1 1/2 inch that'll squeeze on here with a ring clamp and leave it down to the neck. You want to get as much flow as you can. So whatever you choose, or if you just want to put a 1 inch, then put a 1 inch right there. But this is what I like. This Aquascape Aquaforce, or any one that looks like this, is really the way I like to go. When it comes to a quick, easy, drop it in, plug and play, let's shoot some air back in and actually move the water in this pond while I'm doing this leak experiment kind of deal. And really, that is kind of it when it comes to that. Any questions for me? Like, I want to hear some experience. Like, who's had a leaky pond? Look at all the hands go up. I knew it was going to go up, all right? It happens. It happens. Even I've seen concrete ponds crack because normally no one pours concrete the way they're supposed to for ponds. They do it for pools. It's the same thing with the concrete cracking like that. So it's a common thing, But that's how I have done it for all these years, you know. And then when it comes to, well, Carlos, what do I do when I find that hole in my liner? How do I fix it? Well, once again, on this page here, you can either get a 45 millimeter patch kit, or you can do a Carlos style, which is basically the best of the best marine sealant, the 3M boat sealant. And what you want in a sealant is what's called stretch cure, right? When it cures, it actually still maintains flexibility. You want that because in our ponds, we can still have movement in our things. We don't want something like, let's say, a 2-part epoxy that when it solidifies and chemically bonds itself, it's as hard as concrete. That's what's going to crack away eventually. That's what's going to peel off whatever you try to fix. You want something that can actually almost be like bubble gum and still stick on. So you want a good sealant like that. Or, like I said, on here, there's a patch kit that actually has, of course, the patch material, which is nothing more than 45 mil liner with a sticky adhesive backing. And then it has a chemical kind of tacky adhesiveness that kind of preps your liner. And like everything we do, whatever you do when it comes to gluing or whatever, clean, dry, and you're ready to go. So that's all there's to that.
What about that Flex Seal tape?
Crap. Absolute, don't believe it. Hate those commercials. It never works.
That boat worked.
A couple times, I've been in such duress because I thought I had that product in my tool bag and didn't have it. I'm going to run to Home Depot because their commercials are so convincing that I'm not going to leak. Oh, it cures underwater. Oh, look at this. Slap it right on that barrel. And there it is. No. No, no, no. I think one time did I ever have a client use something like that. And they said, oh, it still works. And it kind of did, I guess. But no. Don't believe any of that. Don't believe that Flex Seal stuff. I've never had it work. I don't know. Has anyone ever tried it and had it work? Do I not know something?
It doesn't work.
Really?
Cleaned everything too. I think my own liner would clean and actually.
It did. And like you were able to submerge this fix with that Flex Seal, and it worked.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Well, great.
Of course, several years later,
Uh-huh.
we replaced all the liner.
Okay.
But it had worked up.
It worked in that pipe. Okay. So it has worked. Okay, that's good.
There's always one.
Yeah.
They can come to my house and shoot a commercial.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously, I guess it has to work somehow, but I don't. I mean, to me, I'd rather go a little bit above and beyond on a product I know is made for that application and is true. Commercials are great, but I don't know. Just been in it for a while. How about, has anyone ever had a skimmer body crack or a biotank crack, the actual plastic? Anyone ever had that happen? That can happen too. Even though those molded units are pretty strong, what we mostly get is skimmer distortion, right? Your skimmer used to be nice and square at one point, now it's all bowed in or compressed and you can't get your basket in. That's why now most of these skimmers now are actually made of circles. It's a little bit more structural integrity as far as compaction pressure on the sides, but that can happen too. Any questions for me that anyone might think of? Yes?
So, me and my wife Liz bought our house back in the pandemic, and it was built in the late 60s, early 70s. It has a plastered pool that was drained for a decade. Yeah, about a decade. We converted it into a pond.
Okay.
It is a very, very deep pond, obviously. Like 40,000?
It's like 8 feet, and the pond has at least 40,000 gallons volume in it. And
Anyway, so we, through trial and error, because this is her thing, she's an environmental scientist, and we've gone through the process of setting it up, and we have many koi fish now, and we've set up bog filters and bog filtration above ground separately with a submerged pump, 10,000 gallon flow, or 12,000. Anyways, and one of the main things that I'm interested in is, how to increase the total surface area of filtration and flow outside of the pond, and then also, what would you recommend for such a large volume on maintaining it? Because one of the biggest things is what you were talking about earlier with organic debris and decomposition. Cleaning it is, even with netting, even with everything else, we have a very large amount of coverage on the surface of the pond that is covered by plants. It's just
It gets overwhelming. The bigger you go,
Yes.
the more overwhelming these water features can be.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is you have to marry or union your filtration with your pond volume and bioload of the amount of fish.
Right.
Because trust you me, I have clients that have 5,000 gallons of water, but they have so many fish, They should have 30,000. But what they do is they do have 30,000 gallons of filtration behind the scenes on a 5,000 pond because their bioload supersedes even the normal volume. I mean, you know, that's back in the day, if you can remember, the Japanese sunken tea gardens, they had so many koi in there. And what it was that's what's called a free flow system. You know, the water was always just flowing through it. It didn't need a filter. So they could pile in all these fish because it was getting new water all the time. And we all heard that story about that catfish farmer guy. They got all that trouble. Or there was a big old stink about all the water he was using because he was doing the same thing with all his catfish, pumping all that water through. Well, we are closed systems. We're just a big aquarium is all we are. 5,000, 10,000, 40,000 gallons, whatever it is. So now we're a little bit more concerned about, okay, how do we balance basically the biological with the physical separation of particulate, right? And when you come to big, deep water stuff, now you're concerned more of cleaning this pond from different levels, like a bottom intake side, getting it where everything's settled out of suspension more effectively. And the first line of defense, of course, is your skimmer. Trying to get as much of that floating debris before it has a chance to get saturated, turn to nothing and muck and everything else and come back down.
How would you suggest putting a skimmer on a pool that has like an overhang lip and like it has a normal
Retro. Put it inside it.
Like,
So, I'm talking put it inside the pond, inside the edging, yeah. Most of us, when we design, we do the excavation as designers and builders, and we can actually subset it already right into the side of the pond. You guys don't have that. So what you can do is, grab that, and I have a big one right now in my garage where you actually just take the whole unit. Now, here's what you're gonna have to do. Those skimmers are made of plastic. They're buoyant. They're not really made to go in the water, because what's gonna happen, you're gonna hook plumbing up and it's gonna float on you and start turning and twisting all over the place. So you're gonna have to drop your water. And what I had to do on two of my clients, we had to drop the water. I had to build, remember, they're water specific. They have to be at a certain level against that water. You can't just haps-daisy just throw them in there. You got to know where that is. Then what I did is I took concrete and those cinder blocks, and I made a base for it, a pedestal. Then I encased the entire surrounding and the back of that skimmer and locked it like a tooth against the side of the pool. They had a pool too. Because if you don't, that guy, he will come loose and do whatever he wants to go crazy. I mean, if anyone else has experience with that. So you can do it. You're just going to put the entire skimmer inside the edge of the pool, basically, and then run your plumbing and jump out with it if you need to. That's how you do that. But to answer your question, remember, when it comes to bog filtration, your bog has to be 30% at least of the volume of your pond. So if you just have a baby little bog this size on your pool that's almost half the size of this room, it's not going to do much of anything, you know. And so it's how you build it to. 4 bogs.
3 bogs technically, so we have like one on like the shallower side, we have one that's like central that goes down to the deep and the shallow, and that one comes from a terrace that we built on top down to a big like dog pool thing essentially, and all of these are filled with like I have like 60 species of plants in them.
Right.
And that goes into the main part. And then we have the shallow, like where you're supposed to get in it, a pool where it's like 2 feet deep or whatever, and has steps, and a little circular step area that's like completely planted up, like on the side.
I'll use that for the skimmer.
So,
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Just from the stairs.
Yeah. And you remember too, when it comes to skimmers, you want some type of push control on that. And when I say, what does that mean? You always put a skimmer on the other side of your waterfalls or any kind of push current, right? I do what's called TPR jets, push jets sometimes, where I have valve controls and manifolds where I take all the power of that water and I actually have separate jets that push and give rotation to the water. Because what you don't want is like a waterfall and your skimmer right next to it. Well, what happens to the rest of this pond? It's doing nothing. It's sitting. So just make it across from wherever you're shooting water, and it helps push the debris towards that intake of the skimmer mouth, and that's how it's supposed to work. Better.
Question, does anyone have issues with skimmers and turtles? Because my little red-eared sliders that have lived in my pond for a while.
Yeah, I built 5 turtle-specific ponds that needed skimmers, and that's the first thing on my list, is not to get those guys trapped in the mouth or stuck inside a skimmer. Exactly, they'll absolutely drown. So what you do is you build a guard basically on the front of that skimmer. You space out your guarding fingers big enough to let, of course, the leaves go through, but not enough for those turtles to go through. And that's how I kept the turtles out of the skimmers. Yeah.
Kind of switching. So
Yep.
do you use, beneficial bacteria?
I do for startup ponds, like brand new ponds. Now, some people swear by it. Oh, Carlos, I put this beneficial bacteria muck buster, right? Oh, it helps without sludge above my pond, and I swear to God it works. And I have other clients that use it and go, it doesn't really do anything. I still got muck. I still got enough of it. So in all my years, I'm still out in the debate. Now, I definitely put beneficial bacteria in brand new ponds because you have to see the system, right? You want to get all that beneficial bacteria getting on the filters and chomping away at all the nutrients and nitrates and all the cycle of the ammonia cycle for that water and those fish. But once your pond is matured or cycled, I don't know. There's so many products out there. I just I've not come across a magic bullet yet and going, oh my God, I need this. Like, this really destroys this muck. I don't know. I like the cleaning. I like the cleaning.
Like everybody has a thing that I run into a lot is visibility, right? Like right now my pond's crystal clear. But because I have a lot of big fish, I have a lot of turtles, the water, like I'm not going to win that battle. If I want to clear it up, it's not algae, it's literally muck is a nice word for it, turtle muck. So I will do settlement chamber that happens to have plants in it, so you call it a bog. And once I flush that, I mean, it takes 2 days and now you can see the bottom. Yeah. Or like that real fine muck that's in the water for water clarity, just fine filtration. And even as a temporary setup, just to fine mesh screens, just to catch it for, a few days and then it clears back up. But
there's a product called a flocculant. And a flocculant grabs, when people say I have murky water, because they have so much just stuff floating, it looks almost like just junk. Yeah. It basically binds on it, grabs it, and drops it as suspension to the bottom into your benthic layer where your beneficial bacteria normally are to help choke it away. Or that's where your bottom drain intakes or whatever's, sucking that away to the filters. Me, I'm old school. I just want to go after what it is and get rid of it for the most part and stay on top of it. So it's about good design, but sometimes you can only go so far when you get into a product that's already been done. The pool's already there. It's already kind of what it is. I can't just go in there and break apart the bottom and install, 2 or 3 bottom drains along because, that's what you really need on such huge volumes of water. But there are ways to get around it. There are ways to get around it.
My plants, for the most part, collect all that sediment and stuff on the bottom. So bigger ponds, on a very, very bottom portion kind of thing.
Right.
It takes you to the biggest waterfall. And so, when you move plants around and they go in there, get them this out, taking over certain parts of it. There's just so much debris built up
Muck.
there. You find all the dragonflies and stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the cool parts, yeah. So I always have my pond vac ready because when I start moving all that stuff, as you know, it collects so much stuff and then it just flows right back into my pond. So that's when, if I can, I design bogs to where I can actually do a bottom drain on the bog where I can really thoroughly rinse from the top side and drain that out. Always do pitch on it so you can actually just open up a big old 2-inch ball valve and drain that junk out instead of having to, throw something down on an arm to get down to like a centipede vault. Yes?
We're setting up a pond, and I was reading, I really wanted, I was asking to have drains in their rubber liners and going in. And as my sister, she said she doesn't have one. But I was looking that they sell this one that you don't have to make a hole, you just put it in there. Do you know if those work?
Yes, I've done that. Some of my clients, it's too late. The pond's already built. I can't just drain everything and somehow lift the liner and go through the liner and do all the new plumbing. It's called a retro drain, just like the retro skimmer, okay? It's not part of it. We have to do it after the fact. And all you do, exactly, you can take that elbow of, mostly they're in 90, right? Go into a 2-inch pipe or whatever kind of PVC and literally put it to the bottom. No, because you really can't, right? You can't do any kind of sloping effect because it's on top of the liner, and the last thing you want to do is put gravel and try and make the sloping effect because gravel traps all that junk. No, if anything, you want those fish swimming around that bottom intake. They're kicking that stuff up every time they swim by it, and that's why it gets sucked in and goes up to your filters. So even if that bottom intake is retroed above, you might not get as many leaves and stuff going perfectly into it, but you'll still get a lot more effective cleaning than without one. When it comes to deep water ponds, like I design ponds, sometimes they're 4, 5, and 6 feet deep, or very big ponds, I do want something picking up the junk from the bottom and picking it up from the top at the same time. Absolutely. So yes, those are effective. I've done them before. They work. They're fine. It just doesn't look so pretty. Because you see a pipe going down. You see this weird thing at the bottom of your pond versus just a small dome thing at the bottom that normally is what a bottom intake is. Yeah.
I should wait until spring, but I'm impatient. What do you recommend for fish food?
Okay. Some of the best that when it comes to, and this is on this too, as far as fish food, you're looking for something for the cooler months of winter and early spring that's wheat germ based, okay?
No, I'm talking about in the summer.
In the summertime, oh, that's out there. That's out there. Because some of my clients, they spend $500 a month on koi food. Insane, right? I would never do that. Heck no. And then others, my mother sometimes, she'll go to Walmart and get some, I don't know, bag of, I don't know, I think it's even catfish food going mother. There has to be something in the middle. I like most of the foods made by those Quebec farms. I like their foods. And you'll find on this link right here, the Pond Guy, thepondguy.com is a website. They have a lot of good foods on there. I just am partial to Quebec farms and some of the stuff they pump out. So it's really up there. Everyone has their kind of preference. Just don't go cheap. Just don't go stupid cheap. Don't go to Amazon and try and price point the cheapest food on there because you get what you pay for, right? Just like we do, right? You know, fast food versus home cooked good stuff. You know, you gotta, get what you pay for. So, to me, the Quebec farms, I think, have a more balanced kind of, food regimen of some of the stuff they provide. That's just my choice.
Different subject, back on the nets.
Uh-huh.
What I did is I got PVC, I think I did 4 inch or 2 inch or something
Okay.
big, and I made a little T up there and made a foot.
Yeah.
Come up, made a bend across the pond to the other side.
Yeah, like what I talked about. Yeah, same thing. You put ribs across, right? So instead of just one pole, you can do that standing pole with the T and then put smaller half-inch through that, and now you have ribs that go like this across your pond, and then you drape the net. Same thing. Whatever you do, just make sure it kind of tilts everything off the corners of the pond, and that's the best way to do it.
Thing in the middle, I didn't like that very much because it
Yeah.
tilted and stuff like that.
Heavier. Or you can make arms on it. You can get a 4 and make arms like this, like a stand on something, like bit legs that go out.
On either side.
Yeah. There you go too.
That across.
Smart. Like that. Dwayne.
I don't think you do, but by chance for these links you have on here, are they on your website? And if we click on them, do you get credit for us going there to shop?
Affiliate links.
No, I don't. No, not at all. No. These are just links that I thought were relevant to today's discussion as far as the patch kit I talked about, the netting, the food, the air kit, and the spare pump, just in case, people just wanted something that I have used and I know works, so that's all that is. All right, thanks, Lynn.
I know you don't like Flex Tape, the other product that you see at Lowe's is spray foam for ponds.
Yeah,
Do you like that?
I use it every day,
Okay.
but for a reason, not for sealant. Not for sealant. It is not 100%. No. I use the expandable foam to basically push 90% of that water over rocks, right? Because I'm designing waterfalls, or I need that gap space to be filled with something, but never as a leak material. No. People think, I've seen people do it, and it'll go right through it. It's not made to be leak proof, that expandable foam. Yeah. You want, like I said, you can find this 3M marine boat sealant at Lowe's or Home Depot, and that's one of my favorites to use when it comes to any adhesion on skimmer flanges, biotanks, patches on liner. That's leak proof, and that's stretchable. Yeah, 10-inch caulk. Yeah. Any other questions? Any ideas? Anything else? No? All right.
I have a question. If we need to offset it, we can. So we mentioned rats. So on my pond, which is above ground, the rats in now 3 out of the 4 corners decided to make a shortcut instead of going around the outside of the pond. So where the liner is folded, they made a shortcut and cut a hole in it. So what would be your suggestion as to how to patch essentially what looks like a kid's art project when you unfold it? And then it's got a fold.
And that's the worst one. That's the worst one to fix. You never. It's always hard to put a proper patch on a fold of a liner, right? Especially, or if you have, let's say, too much flex already into it. The only thing you're going to have to do is do a double patch. Are you able to get to that piece of liner to where you can patch it from the back and the front if you were to pull off the coping and get to it? That's what I would suggest. You got to give that more reinforcement. So most people give it just to the front. No, no, no. Let's go the extra mile. Let's go ahead.
One of the little holes.
Yeah, spread out that liner, okay? And then you can take a piece of wood or anything else like that, because of course you really want to make sure that your adhesion really sticks hard. Don't just press it on there. No, I'm talking smash it on. Yeah, and then do the same to the other side, and then make sure put extra sealing even around the patch. Oh, another thing with patches, cut them in a circle. Why a circle? Because when you cut a patch in a square, and let's say you're cleaning your own pond, and there's that patch on the side of the pond, and you're, I don't know, grabbing some string algae off, well, you catch the tip of the square edge of that patch, and then it lifts right off, right? It's a lot less likely to lift off if you cut the patch like a circle. There's really no hard edges to peel off that patch, right off that liner. But that's what I do, double patch that
On
thing.
a side note, the only time flex tape has ever worked is when I did two sides.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Doubled up.
Stick it to itself.
Yeah, there you go. Stick it to itself. All righty. Anybody else? Good, good, good. All right.
All right, let's thank Carlos.
All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to put these in the backs in case anyone needs them. By the way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, you're welcome, welcome. Do you need one of those? Okay. That's for you.